Good evening. It's good to see each one here. Would it be good if everybody kind of moves to the front half of the church? I'll give you a little time to do that. All right. Well, I think we'll start with a word of prayer here, and we'll go from there then. Let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you for the day that you gave to us. Thank you for the fall weather that we have. Thank you for bringing us here safely. And I pray, Lord, that you would continue to be with Lawrence and Linda and their family as they continue to grieve and just move on from the funeral. Just pray for the others in the church, Lord, that may be experiencing health issues or things like that. I just pray that you would bless each one. And I pray, Lord, for Mike as he has the talk tonight. I pray that you would bless him, and just pray that we can listen well and understand what he has to say. In your name we pray, amen. All right, so tonight Mike Martin is here. I'll let him introduce himself further to talk about CAM insurance. So let's have a song, and then we'll turn the time over to you, Mike.
Let's turn in Hymns of the Church to song number 930. Song number 930 in the Hymns of the Church.
Can I doubt his tender mercy? Good evening, and thank you for the privilege to come and share with you this evening. Evelyn does travel with me. I guess I don't know how much introduction we need, but as we were sitting here singing that song, I thought, when we got married here 52 years ago, why, the benches were turned around and we were looking that direction instead of looking this direction. And so I'm sure many of you still remember that. And so when I told Terrell that we did get here a little early this evening, and we took a stroll, I took a stroll down memory lane out in the cemetery. And it's been a number of years since I did that. And so, yes, sort of a reminder, life is short. And so, but it's a privilege to be here tonight. And so for those of you that are not acquainted with us, Evelyn and I did grow up here. Evelyn's father was pastor or minister here for about 10 years. And about 30-some years ago, Evelyn and I fell in love with a little dairy farm up at Hayward, Wisconsin. All 5 of our children were still living at home yet. And so we did pack up and we moved to Wisconsin. We did milk cows for 10 years. But when our children got old enough to go their separate ways, our milk cows went down the highway because Mother and I did not want to do it by ourselves. And so, and yes, Andy, I still miss my cows, mostly just twice a month, though. All right? Some of you know what that means. And maybe I should, who's all ever milked cows before? Okay, thank you, you bet. So we do have 5 children, 4 of them are married. We do have about 14 grandchildren, and our oldest grandson got married about 5-6 years ago, and he's got 2 daughters. And so that really made us old when we found we were great-grandchildren, great-grandparents, and so anyhow. But we still live on the edge of the farm there. Rupert and Evangeline bought our farm from us about 8 years ago. They turned us out to pasture. And so we built a house in the pasture field. And so, yeah. And they don't milk cows anymore. They have a few beef cattle there. We get to watch the calves, but they've got all the headaches. So that's nice. And Evelyn and I started working with CAM Mutual Aid about 17 years ago, and we do the public relations work, which involves presentations like this. We also train the new representatives. And so we were over at Arthur, Illinois yesterday morning to train a representative, and Lord willing, Friday morning we train a representative down at Delphi, Indiana, down close to Lafayette. And then next week we're planning to travel on down to Kentucky and have a program there in southern Tennessee Monday and Tuesday evenings. And then, Lord willing, we're planning to run down to Florida and North Carolina and look at the hurricane damage down there. We've got a number of representatives down there, and they'd like to have a little bit of assistance for a couple days. And so, Lord willing, that's what we're planning to do next week. Okay, if we could have the lights turned off, I think it's going to make it easier to see the slides. And I came across this verse a number of years ago in the Beside the Still Waters devotional booklet. And I appreciated the way the writer had put the words together. And so I quickly made up a slide. In the next slide here, you can see that we are the other CAM. And yes, people do get us confused with Christian Aid Ministries, but we are a total separate organization. I do like to tell people that we are the original CAM. And so I guess that's our claim to fame, I guess. I like that verse in John chapter 13, verse 35, where Jesus said, "By this shall all men know that you're my disciples, if you have love one to another." And yes, I think if we have that kind of love that God intended for us to have, I think we'll have a desire to want to reach out and help each other, and especially if someone suffers a loss of some type. And that's what mutual aid is all about, is just plain helping each other. And I think it can be a wonderful testimony to a community when people say, oh yes, that's where the Mennonites live. They help each other. Yes, our neighbors are watching us. Our neighbors watch us a whole lot closer than we're aware of at times. A number of years ago, my older brother had a real nasty chimney fire at his house. And you can see they're getting their hoses stretched out. They don't even have the water turned on yet. And that fire had a real serious start on things. The next picture here, you can see they've got the water turned on. They're knocking it down. But you can see it burning out through the ventilator in the roof there. And yes, that fire had a real serious start on things. And you know, it was a couple of months after this happened, and the people in town were still talking about how when that Mennonite family had their house fire, the whole church pitched in to help them out. And you're probably thinking, well, of course we do that. Yeah, that's part of our heritage, isn't it? But you know, I think it's part of our identity as well. I think it bears out the fact that our neighbors are watching us. A few of you may remember about 17, 18 years ago, there was a real bad farm accident at Harrisonburg, Virginia. It was a middle-aged father and his wife and their 2 daughters and their hired man lost their lives. It was in a manure pit accident on a dairy farm just outside of Harrisonburg there. And yes, when I read that on my computer, on my Yahoo News, I read that. And I picked up my telephone and I called Evelyn's sister, Linda, that lives there in the area. And did you know those people? And she said, yes. Sunday night, there was a special program at the Bank Church, and we visited with those people after church. And this accident happened, I think, on Monday afternoon when these people were killed. There was a manure pit accident. And I'm convinced that just the fact that it was a Mennonite family, the news reporters just sort of flocked in there, and they wrote extra articles about that farm accident. And one of the writers at the end of her article, and I believe it was a lady that wrote this particular article, and at the end of her article she wrote, the Showalter family lived in a quiet Mennonite community where the ladies hang up each other's laundry. I thought, wow, now isn't that nice? Now maybe you ladies here at Salem, maybe you hang up each other's laundry. Up in Wisconsin where we live, the ladies don't do that very much. Well, I'll have to admit that when I read that, that caught me off guard. I remember sitting back in my chair, I read that the second time. And I probably read it the third time because I still remember asking myself, why did that lady write that? And you know, I don't know. But I suspect that probably someone had told her that the Mennonites help each other. And she didn't know what that meant. But she was a writer. She had to come up with something. And that's what it said right there in the national news. And I think it's all right to smile about that. But you know, I think it bears out the fact that the people of the world know that we plain people have a strong sense of community. And we don't talk about this very often. And you're probably scratching here, Mike, now what do you mean by that? And hey, it's real simple. We care about each other. And yes, we demonstrate that care in different ways. But one of the ways is by helping each other in time of need. But you know, sometimes it's just being there for each other in time of sickness or sorrow or death. Yes, somebody's in the hospital, we go visit them. Well, we used to, if they let us. It's been different the last couple of years. We've learned a few things, haven't we? What we thought were our rights, we found out they were privileges, didn't we? Well, anyhow. But you know, and we pray for each other. Yes. And you see, it's because of this, because we care about each other. This is why we practice mutual aid. And I don't think the idea of helping each other is a new idea by any means. No, I don't think so. And maybe it's even a throwback to the good old days. Many of us still remember hearing our fathers and our grandfathers talk about how those farmers used to own that threshing machine together, and they took it from farm to farm, helping each other. And I'm too young. I never helped feed a thresh machine. But I watched it already from a distance, and I know there was more than one reason they helped each other. That was a very labor-intensive operation. Ever help feed a thresh machine, Wayne? Huh? Anyhow, yeah. Well, even though I never helped feed a thresh machine, I remember when I was a boy, I remember when the neighbor's barn burned down, how the whole church got together and we built a new barn for the neighbor man. And I had a couple opportunities to help bend a few nails on some of those projects. I'm thinking of Harold Myers had a big barn fire and they built a shed there, and yep, those were special. And they were good days. We got a lot of work done in a day's time, but there was a lot of fun. There was a lot of fellowship. And yes, of course, there was always lots of good food to eat. You bet. There were good days. And I think sometimes we're missing out on some blessings today. We don't do that so much anymore. Well, now, Mike, not so many of us are farmers. We don't have as many excuses to get together and help each other as what they used to. Well, that might be, but you know, sometimes I wonder if we don't sometimes have an attitude. Yeah, I need a new garage, I need a new shed, but sometimes our attitude is, I can afford to do this. I'll just call the pole building company and have them come and build my new garage instead of calling my brothers and say, hey, we're going to have a frolic at our house Saturday morning. Why don't you all come and help us build our new garage? Did I say my wife and I built a new house about 8 years ago? And yeah, my wife was there poking me a little bit. Are you going to practice what you preach? Are we going to have a work day now? And we did. And it was late in the fall, and it was on a Saturday, and of course, everybody was busy. But we had a half a dozen guys from church show up and help us build our garage that day. You bet. They're good days. One more challenge for us tonight. When John F. Kennedy was inaugurated President of the United States, he gave a challenge to the American people. Probably not too many of us that remember what he said, but I think this is the way he said it. He said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And I'd like to just borrow from his idea tonight. And I'd like to challenge us tonight. Let's not ask, well now, Mike, what's CAM going to do for me, Mike? What am I going to get out of this thing, Mike? How's CAM going to improve my bottom line? No, I don't think we ought to ask that. We might be disappointed, but instead I think we ought to, well, Mike, how can I reach out and help my brother that got hit by a tornado? He lives way down in Mississippi or way out in Oklahoma. Now we live way up here in Indiana. How can we reach out and help him? Because yes, I think it's when we start reaching out and helping other people, that's when God really starts blessing us in a special way. And so I'm very thankful that about 65 years ago, there were 3 ministers over in the Middlebury area. Eli Miller was the bishop at the Town Line Conservative Mennonite Church. Daniel Bontrager was one of the ministers there at the Woodlawn Amish Mennonite Church. And then Clarence Yoder was the bishop at the Pleasant Grove Conservative Mennonite Church. And these 3 men saw the need for a sharing plan. And it's no secret, all 3 of these men came from Amish background. They knew how the Amish people reach out and help each other. And so these men had a vision. They saw the need for a sharing plan. I honestly don't have the details, but I can imagine them maybe getting their heads together, and it might have gone a little bit like this. You know, the way we used to do it, we used to pass the hat. And yes, that was a good way. But you know, if we'd try to pass the hat every time a tornado hits somebody's chicken house down in Kentucky or Tennessee, or somebody out there in Kansas or Oklahoma gets hit with a tornado, if we'd pass the hat every time something happened, some Sundays we might have to pass it twice, maybe 3 times. Yeah, and furthermore, I wouldn't even know what my share is to put into the hat every time the hat comes around. And so I suspect these 3 men may have been asking the question, hey, why can't we have an organized system so we can all pitch in and help? And so I know what my share is to put into the hat when the hat comes around. So that was the beginning of the Conservative and Amish Mennonite Mutual Aid Society way back in 1958. And you know, that reminds me just now, Donald Flora was the representative here at Salem for many, many years, you bet. And so Today, we just call it CAM Mutual Aid, okay? But today we still pass the hat. But we pass the hat twice a year. We pass the hat in January, and then we pass the hat again in July. And what my share is to put into the hat, my share is based on how God has blessed me. And so I make a list of my house and my furniture. I make a list of my barn and my farm equipment, my livestock, my business and my business equipment, my business machinery. I make a list of that stuff. And then in January, when the hat comes around, I pay an assessment. But it's based on how God has blessed me. And so what my share is to put into the hat is probably different than Wayne's share, or Dave's share, or Richard's share, because it's based on how God has blessed each one of us. And yes, the Bible tells us, bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Galatians 6:2, and that's been our motto. That's been our motivation for many, many years. I like verse 10 in the same chapter. It says, as we have therefore opportunity, let us do good unto all men, but especially unto them who are of the household of faith. This is a picture of our office building. It's located over at Middlebury. Some of you might know where it is, right along US 20 there, just around the curve there, about a quarter mile from the big Essenhaus restaurant. Sort of right across the street from that Marathon gas station is sort of where it is. We do have 2 men work full-time in the office there. CAM is a church-based mutual aid established in October of 1958. Today, we still serve the conservative Mennonite churches, even though, unfortunately, many of the conservative conference churches are not real plain anymore, but since 2 of those ministers were bishops in the conservative, they do still qualify to be part of CAM. But we also have many, many Amish Mennonite or Beachy churches, fellowship churches, charity churches, other plain churches of like faith. And we have some old order Amish people that are part of, we have many, many of the new order Amish churches that are part of CAM. And so, but we also have Dunkard Brethren churches, German Baptist people that are part of, so no, we're not just exclusively Mennonite, but we are plain people. CAM is a brotherhood sharing plan. Somebody gets hit with a tornado, someone has a fire, we all pitch in, we help share their loss with them. And no, CAMs are not an insurance company. Yes, we do operate a little bit similarly to insurance companies in some respects. And yes, this takes the place of house insurance. But CAM, not an insurance company. CAM does not insure any automobiles. We don't insure any trucks. And CAM does not provide liability insurance. Now, we're not suggesting that you don't need liability insurance for your property or your business. But if you need liability insurance, you do have to purchase your liability insurance from an insurance man in town, okay? And yes, real quickly, liability insurance is what pays for someone else's property if they think it was your fault that their property got damaged or they got hurt and it was your fault. And so that would be liability. And I'm not going to spend more time on. I will give opportunity for questions at the end, so if someone has any questions about that liability, don't hesitate to ask me, or you can ask me afterwards. But CAM does provide a ministry opportunity, a service opportunity to fulfill the law of Christ by bearing one another's burdens. And yes, we do provide help to our families for property losses that result from fire, storm, theft. And we offer financial as well as physical and moral support. We do have a board of directors made up of 9 men. I'm not going to say much this evening about accountability, but yes, this is our accountability, if you will. These men meet 3 times a year. They keep an eye on the checkbook balance. They keep an eye on the number of claims that are coming in, and they make many decisions concerning the operation of CAM. Now, 3 of those men do serve on our executive committee, and those 3 men do meet each month. And they also make telephone calls during the month. And a unique situation pops up maybe what we call outside the box. Why, we don't just have one guy sitting behind the desk making all the decisions. No, he calls the other two men and they discuss the situation and they arrive at a conclusion. If it's really a tough one, they might say, hey, wait a minute, the 9-man board of directors is going to meet next month. We're going to let the 9-man board take a look at this situation and make a decision how we're going to handle this situation. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of how we operate behind the scenes. We do have real close to 300 representatives. We don't always have one in every church. We try to have one, at least one represent in each community where we have families. And so once a year we do have a business meeting over in the Goshen, Middlebury area, and all of our representatives get invited to attend our annual business meeting. And it's our representatives that elect the men that serve on the board of directors. Those men on the board of directors do serve a 3-year term on the board of directors. So the purpose of that nominating committee is just to make up a slate of names for our election process. But we do have 4 people on staff, 3 people at the office, and I didn't mention we do have a part-time lady that works a couple days a week at the office there. So 3 people at the office plus myself. And yes, we do work very closely with many different banks. And whenever a bank gives someone a loan to buy a house, to buy a property, to buy a farm, or to buy some equipment or machinery, the bank is always interested in having their risk covered. And so it is a very common occurrence that a banker will call our office and they want proof of insurance on one of our families. And even though we're not an insurance company, most of the banks are happy to accept that piece of paper that we send to the bank. And we promise the bank that if anything would happen to your house, the bank will get their money. That's what we promise to the bank. And actually it is federal law. Anytime a banker gives someone a loan, that banker must have that piece of paper in your file, because the government inspectors come around and check up on these banks, and that banker could be in hot water if he doesn't have that piece of paper in your file. And so that piece of paper, what they call an insurance binder, is what the banks call that piece of paper that we send to them. We do have approximately 16,000 families across the United States that are part of CAM. Property valuation runs on the north side of $7 billion. And I'll be real honest, I'm not used to working with those kinds of numbers. I really wasn't sure I knew how much money that is. I'm not even sure our congressmen know how much that is. But I had to pull out a piece of paper and I had to start writing down zeros. Because you see, that would be $7,000 million worth of property that our members have covered with. And we're not talking about the value of the farmland. We're just talking about our houses and our furniture, our farm buildings, our farm equipment, our livestock, our businesses, our business equipment. God has blessed our plain people very richly. I don't say that lightly. I have a friend that puts it this way: life is not fair, or we all would have been born down in Haiti. Ooh, how about that one? Yeah, life is not fair, or we all would have been born down in Haiti. And I'll have to confess, I was pretty old before I admitted, yes, Mike, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. All of us were born with a silver spoon in our mouth. No, we're not rich, but yes, we are compared to the rest of the world's population. We have a great deal to be thankful for. Our assessments are based on the number of claims that come in. We do add on a little bit for administrative expenses, and we are trying to slowly build up our reserve fund. And so even though our assessments are based on the number of claims that come in, our assessments don't change every 6 months, because if there's a little bit left over, we do put it in our reserve fund. And but we do mail out invoices twice a year, January and July. But our members do understand that CAM is a mutual aid, and what that really means is if there would be a huge catastrophe of some type, there is always the possibility that we might ask our people to make an extra payment And that has happened 2 different times in the past 65 years. About 18 years ago, a big tornado went across southern Indiana. Davis County, Indiana was just about wiped off the map. And we have a lot of families down there in Davis County that are part of CAM. And we had to send out letters. We had over $10 million worth of damage from that one tornado there in Davis County 18 years ago. But the other time was back in 1965 when the Palm Sunday tornadoes went across Elkhart County, or Goshen, Middlebury, Shipshewana. A lot of our families had their farm buildings wiped out. And so everyone had to make an extra. So it has happened twice in the last 65 years. We do have our enlistments divided into 2 groups. We have our primary. This is where we list our house and furniture. And then we also have commercial accounts. But on the primary side, yes, your house, furniture, maybe you got a couple tools in the garage, or maybe you've got some other buildings there, non-farm building, non-business, garden tractor, lawnmower, buggies, 4-wheelers, bicycles, sporting equipment, boat and motor, dirt bikes, snowmobiles, RVs, camper trailers, our church house, schoolhouse, they all come in at the cheaper rate on the primary side. And yes, the reason we have them divided into 2 groups, we get a discount on our house and furniture, okay? We only pay half price on our house and furniture, but it's only on our primary dwelling. And so if someone does happen to own a rental house, or you happen to have a secondary home down in Florida, for example, those are listed on the commercial. So it's only our primary dwelling that we get the discount on. So that's why we call these our primary accounts. But on the commercial side then, this is where we list farm buildings. If you're in the farming business, commercial businesses, all types of commercial businesses, sawmill, pallet shops, bulk food stores, restaurants, bakeries, cabinet shops, truss shops, many, many different kinds of businesses that we have covered. Inventory, and our inventory we just listed as a lump sum figure. Rental houses, and yes, we do cover many, many rental properties for people. Secondary homes, whether it's in Sarasota, whether it's in Phoenix, Arizona, or even a getaway cabin up in the mountains somewhere, yes, we cover many rental secondary dwellings. Construction equipment, business equipment, tools, excavating equipment, logging equipment, tool trailers, farm equipment, machinery, livestock, hay, grain, feed inventory. And yes, we offer builder's risk. And we have many, many people that appreciate the builder's risk. One of our families was building 2 brand new chicken houses about 10, 11 years ago, and this happened out in Monterey, Virginia. And before they ever started building those 2 chicken houses, he called the CAM representative, we're building 2 chicken houses, write them up for us. And so now these are broiler houses, broiler chickens, they're not laying hens. And so, but 63 feet wide, 624 feet long, pretty popular size up and down the East Coast there. And that does happen to be the dimensions of Roger and Linda's big chicken house there is a 63 by 624. But that picture was taken on a Saturday morning. And a couple hours later, and this is what it looked like. And it wasn't a tornado, but the wind got in there and lifted up those trusses and slammed them back down again. And the wall blew out there along the trees. And there was 240 feet of trusses that were cracked and broken. And this happened about lunchtime on Saturday, and it made a real mess. And they didn't know what they were going to do. It's going to take us a couple weeks to get this all cleaned up. I think there are 16 churches in the Southeastern Mennonite Conference. And on Sunday morning, it was announced in all 16 churches, we need volunteers tomorrow morning at the James and Brenda Helmuth farm. And bring your chainsaws along. Well, the problem is James and Brenda don't live at Harrisonburg, where most of the people live. James and Brenda live back at Monterey, which is a mission community. It's only about 5 miles from the West Virginia state line. And this was in the fall. You can see by the leaves on the trees there. And the farmers were busy filling silo. and they didn't know if anybody was going to show up or not. In fact, James's brother showed up about 7 o'clock on Monday morning, and James asked his brother, anybody else going to come? And he said, well, I don't know. He said, I did hear a couple guys talk about it, that they might come. Praise the Lord, there were 70 people that showed up to help. They've got a real long lane, and there were so many cars and trucks going in their long lane that morning. The neighbor and his wife were watching. And their neighbor man is a retired police captain from Florida. And they were looking out the window, and they finally got in their car, and they drove over there and asked, what's going on here? Why do you have so many people coming in here this morning on a Monday morning? And they said, well, you come here, we'll show you what happened. They took them back in the woods. You can't see these chicken houses from the road. They took them back in the woods and showed them what happened. And the neighbor man, well, who are all these people you have here helping you? Well, they're just friends of ours. They're just volunteers that are here to help. He said, what do you mean volunteers? Aren't you even going to pay them? Well, yes, we're going to give them lunch and a couple of... That man couldn't believe his ears. You mean there are still people that are willing to come and help without being paid? He just couldn't fathom that. And they went back home, and that lady pulled a couple bags of frozen cookies out of her deep freezer, and she fixed up a plate of frozen cookies and sent her husband back over there to donate that plate of cookies for the noon meal. And that man had tears running down his face when he handed them that plate of cookies. What a testimony. Did I say our neighbors are watching us? Amen. Our neighbors watch us a whole lot closer than we're aware of at times. They took the metal off the top of those trusses, and then they took the chainsaws and cut them in pieces, and the boys stacked it up along the sides. It took them 2 hours to clean it all up. They had an early lunch that day. My wife and I had the privilege to stop by there about 3 weeks after this happened. And the new roof was all done. They had the ceiling in there already. They were getting ready for baby chicks. They were very thankful for all their mutual aid. Our assessment rates on the primary side, this is our house and furniture. That's assessed at a rate of 25 cents per $100. Deductible, if you would have any damage, you'd have a windstorm that would rip off part of your roof, or a hailstorm that would damage your house roof, you would pay $1,000 and CAM would share the rest of the bill with you. On the commercial side, our farm equipment, farm buildings, that is assessed at a rate of $5 per thousand. Okay? Deductible on the commercial side is 5% of the amount of the claim. Now, we do have a $2,000 deductible minimum on our commercial claims. Upset and collision claims, we do have a 10% deductible on upset and collision claims. But there is a $1,000 minimum on primary, and the commercial still has a $2,000 minimum on the deductible. I mentioned logging, that's a real poor picture there. It's real dark, almost looks like a wheel sticking up in the air. It is a wheel sticking up in the air. They had a front end loader, but they didn't have a loader bucket on it. They had forklifts on that machine, and they were going to cut down a great big tree. And so they had the boom way up in the air. They had a fork on each side of the tree to push on it while they were cutting it down, but they forgot to tell the tree to go that way, and the tree decided to go that way. You can see what happened. Mother said there would be days like this, didn't she? And so hate when that happens. Property valuation. Our buildings should be listed at current replacement cost. And this is part of our representative's job. And I don't see Levon here this evening. I know that he had some other obligations tonight. But Matt Slabaugh, Matt and Loretta have been representatives for CAM for many years also. And we're glad Matt's here tonight. But that's part of our representative's job, is to help you understand what a replacement cost, what you should list your buildings for. And our buildings should be listed to at least 80% of replacement cost, and especially to get full coverage on a partial loss. Any item that you have that's listed that's over $2,000 in value, if you want that item to be covered, we do list it separately on our enlistment. And then we do write down the word miscellaneous to cover all the small items. So no, you don't have to make a list of the blender and the toaster and the electric skillet. No, we don't do that. We just put down a lump sum figure for furniture and contents, perhaps 20 or 25,000 is a pretty common figure. And if you've been married for 25, 30 years, we would put down $40,000. It's sort of the way it works. And so rental equipment, perhaps you find yourself leasing a piece of equipment once. You go to the equipment rental place and you need to lease a backhoe for a couple days, or maybe one of these big jackhammer air compressors. Might even be a scissor lift scaffold or a forklift as telehandler. And the guy at the equipment rental place, he might, now you're liable for this piece of equipment. So if anything happens to this machine, you have to pay for it. And so in a case like that, all you need to do is give one quick telephone call to Levon or to Matt, and you'll be covered. And we do cover you for up to 30 days. And if that happens to be a $60,000 piece of equipment, it costs $25 to have that machine covered for a whole month. And even if you're only going to use it for 2 weeks, perhaps. But, so it's very, very reasonable. We don't plan on those things happening. Once in a while, it does happen. And that's embarrassing when that happens. I hate when that happens. And, yeah, it happens real quick. So, hail damage. This happened about 9 years ago down at Farmington, Missouri. Now, Farmington is a Bethel Fellowship Church that's about 65 miles southwest of St. Louis, Missouri. And they had a hailstorm go through there, and they had golf and baseball. Some of it was the size of baseballs dropping out of the sky. My wife and I were down there about 2 or 3 weeks after it happened, and I saw a pickup truck. And I think that pickup truck was only 2 years old, but it had been sitting outdoors when that hailstorm. All the windows were broken out of it. The hood was, and the roof on the cab of that thing was caved in. It did a real number on that pickup truck. You can see this hail, what the hail did to this vinyl siding on the end of this house here. And you know what that hail looks, it's not always round and smooth, sharp, jagged edges. And so, yeah, it really did a number on that vinyl siding. Now this is actually a different building, a different house here. But we also paid for quite a number of metal roofs that needed to be replaced. And so, I think we know what that is, don't we? And this happened 11 years ago down at Macon, Mississippi. A tornado, and it hit the J. Hoover farm. Jay and Shirlene Hoover. Now, Shirlene is one of Edwin and Tressie Knapp's daughters. Jay grew up in Pennsylvania, but this is their farm there. And you look up here at the top, you can see what's left of their house. And they had a large implement shed. And here you can see where the grain bins used to sit. They had just built a brand new farm shop about 1.5 years before this happened. And that farm shop had big overhead door on the end of it, and there was a roll door back here where they could back the semi in there. The best part of this story, back across the field, 1/4 mile back, they've got 6 chicken houses, and those 6 chicken houses were not hit. We were very thankful for that. But Shirlene was at home that morning. One of her daughters had stopped by for a couple minutes with a couple grandchildren, and their son-in-law drove up to the house in the pickup truck, and he ran inside. There's a tornado coming. You have to leave. Just get in the car and drive down the road 7 or 8 miles. They don't have a basement under their house. It's because of the soil type they have down there in Macon, Mississippi. Very few people put basements under their houses. And so they did. They grabbed the children, got in the car, drove down. 10 minutes later, and this is what it looked like. That implement shed had steel girders on it. Here you can see what was left of their grain bins. And this is what was left of the house. They had just remodeled their house about 1.5 years before this happened. They had a sign above the fireplace, "For he shall give his angels charge over you, to keep you in all your ways." Evelyn and I had the privilege to stop by and visit Jay and Shirlene about 4 months after this happened. Let me try to explain something. when something like this happens and you lose everything, and we're all human, and yes, we find ourselves out, God, where were you? Don't you care, God? Yes, God cares. God cares about all the details in our life. He really does. God has a special plan for each one of you. God does care, but that doesn't mean we're not going to have some trials along the way. But that meant a great deal to them. That sign was still in place above the fireplace. That was a real confirmation that God does care. Now, this is a family down at Paris, Tennessee, 2.5 years ago that had a tornado hit their house. Marlon and Orpha Wagler. This storm happened at about 11 o'clock on Friday night. On Thursday, the day before, there was a funeral over at Rutherford, Tennessee. Orpha's father had passed away, and he was quite elderly, and so it was not an unexpected loss, but they had been over to the funeral. And then her sister and her husband, Mose, were from Crossville, Tennessee, and they had stopped there at Marlin's to visit for a couple days. And so they were sleeping upstairs in the house. Marlon and Orpha slept on the main floor. And about 10:30, Marlon's brother called up, "Hey, that tornado watch that we heard a couple hours ago, that thing is on the ground right now, and it is headed straight for your place. You need to go to the basement right now." And so they yelled upstairs to her sister and her husband, and they hiked down to the basement. And where's Mose? Mose wasn't. And so Marlon hikes back upstairs, goes all the way upstairs, and Mose had turned over in bed and went back to sleep again. And so Marlon grabbed him by the leg and, "Hey, wake up, we got to go to the basement. There's a tornado coming." And they did, "All right, I'll get up." And he pulled some pants on. They got to and they were only down there less than 10 minutes when this tornado hit. And you can see it took the whole upstairs of the house off, see? And you can see this van that's laying here. It was sitting right beside that other vehicle under the carport. Now the carport is totally gone, and the whole upstairs of the house is gone. In fact, in the night, there it is, scattered right out across the field. Now this is the other end of the house, but you can see the floor joists there. The subflooring was still in place. I think this window right there was the bathroom window, and that wall there, the bathroom was right on the other side of that wall, perhaps. Maybe a little hallway in between there, but anyhow, this happened Friday night, and Saturday there were a whole bunch of volunteers there to help clean up on Saturday. And Monday morning they started rebuilding that house right on top of the same subfloor. And I think they maybe used the same floor plan to rebuild the house. Evelyn and I happened to be out in Hutchinson, Kansas on Saturday when we heard about this tornado. And we were headed down to Lott, Texas to train a representative, but I told Evelyn we're going to swing past Paris, Tennessee on our way home. And so they started rebuilding this house on Monday morning. Evelyn and I arrived there on Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock. We arrived there. They were just finishing up the metal on the roof there around those two dormers. The metal on the backside of the roof was all done already. And by 5 o'clock, that roof was all done. They were expecting a heavy rainstorm that evening, and they got it. That night, they had a heavy rainstorm. They were very determined to get that new roof all done. And you can see the new carport there. And just down the road, about 400 feet, they had a small rental house. It was right on the corner of their property, and that thing came up for sale about 2 years before that. And so they bought that little rental house. There was actually a young couple from their church that was living in this rental house, and they were down in the basement as well and did not get hurt. And so, but again, it just scattered that house right across the lawn there. Out back, they do have two big chicken houses. Now, these are layer hens. These chicken houses are 500 foot long. And tore the metal roof. They had to put a brand new metal roof on this entire chicken house. The second chicken house was a total loss. They had to tear that one down completely and totally rebuild it, which they did. They rebuilt both of them. And okay, if you do have damage of some type from a storm or whatever, contact Levon or Matt. And They'll fill out a little claim form and email it over to the office, and Thad usually writes the check the next day and puts it in the mail. And so I mentioned logging equipment. Yes, a number of years ago, 10, 12 years ago, one of the men in our church, and we do have more loggers in our church than we do farmers, and this machine caught fire out in the woods on a Monday morning. And they did have a fire extinguisher. They tried to knock it down, but it was too hot. They couldn't get it. And it toasted that machine. The engine, the hydraulic pumps, and the hydraulic motors, it was a total loss. And brand new, a machine like that today would cost $500,000. He did purchase it brand new, but he had traded in another machine. And this was about 13, 14 years ago when he bought that machine. And so I don't know exactly what he paid for it, but he had to have it on his list of equipment. He had it listed for $100,000. And this happened on a Monday morning, and the check was in the mailbox on Saturday for $95,000. Remember our 5% deductible. And so, but it happened on Monday morning, check was in the mailbox on Saturday, and the following Tuesday he went and bought a used machine so he'd get back to work again. And so he was very thankful for the quick turnaround. CAM does cover trailers of all types, even when they're going down the highway. Tool trailers, utility trailers, camper trailer, boat trailers, even semi-truck trailers. And one of the reasons we're able to cover trailer, it is state law. Whenever you hook any type of a trailer behind a car or truck and you head down the highway, if that trailer would fishtail across the center line and hit an oncoming car, it's the insurance policy of the truck that pays for the liability on that trailer, that pays for the damage to that other car, is the insurance policy of the truck. CAM would pay you for the damage to your trailer, okay? But we do cover trailers of all types. Fires, yes, we need fire extinguishers. Well, we hope we don't need them, but we should have them. And those things are really cheap. They're much cheaper than building a new house. Yeah. If you don't have a fire extinguisher in your house, don't go to town and buy one. Buy 3 of them. Yeah, buy 5 of them. They're really cheap. And it's embarrassing to have a fire, not even have a fire extinguisher close by. And so, okay, we do have a charity fund grant program at CAM to help families that have an emergency of some type. No, they didn't have a fire. No, they did not get hit with a tornado. But they had some type of an emergency. Remember when someone got hurt on the job, perhaps, and was off of work for a couple months. Or maybe they had a huge medical bill. Whatever the need is, if the local congregation decides you're going to lift an offering to help that family, and if you decide you're going to help that family, we'd like to pitch in and help. And so CAM will match the church's offering up to $3,000. And this family doesn't even have to be a member of CAM. Technically, they don't even have to be members of your church. If they've been attending regularly, they have an emergency, and the local brotherhood decides you're going to lift an offering to help them. We'd like to help. So when disaster strikes, whether you've got a fire, I'm sorry, a fire or a storm. CAM's heard I was going backwards, I apologize. This picture was taken down in Davis County, Indiana. That was a house. I don't think I can imagine what it would feel like to come home and that's all you've got left right there. I don't think I can imagine what that would feel like. So CAM's a vehicle makes it possible for us to reach out and help others. And yeah, mutual aid is an attitude, but it's a privilege to help others, and there are many blessings to be shared from working together as a brotherhood, so that's why we're here. We do have a website, cammutualaid.com, and I know that many of you are part of us. Thank you for being part of us. Okay, I will give opportunity for questions. Could we have the lights turned on, please, perhaps? Anyone have a question on anything? Some of that stuff we covered pretty rapidly. Now, before I forget it, ladies, make sure you stop by the table out there. And we've got some little pan scrapers and some spatulas to help yourself to those items on the table. And there's some pieces of literature there with some of those numbers and rates and stuff on it that we talked about rather rapidly. Anyone else, any questions on anything?
I just had one small question. If your trailer comes unhooked from your vehicle, who's responsible?
If the trailer becomes unhooked from the vehicle, that is did I say I was a lawyer? The lawyers will get richer, right? Yeah, that is, I honestly don't know. And I've never, you know how the law system operates. They do research on precedents. Did something like this ever happened before? I honestly don't know, Andy. I honestly don't know. But that is a good question. Anyone else? Hey, thank you again very much for the privilege to come and share. We'll be around a couple minutes if anyone does have any questions that you want to ask. But so I'm going to turn it back over to Gary to close. Thank you.
All right, Mike, thanks for sharing that. It's very, very interesting. So I guess I knew that Levon was a representative. I didn't know that Matt was, so I learned something tonight. Why don't we stand for prayer? And yeah, if you guys have any questions afterwards, I'm sure Mike would love to talk to you. So Ken, would you lead us in prayer?